Welcome back to the All Turtles podcast, a show about the future of work, the future of health, and entrepreneurs building the future with tech like AI. I'm John Cifuentes, co-founder of All Turtles. Today, Jessica Collier is interviewing Terah Lyons, the founding executive director of the Partnership on AI.
I am so curious about your background. So I think the Partnership on AI sounds like a fascinating organization. I do want us to talk about that. But the first thing that I want to talk about is your experience working in the White House. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it feels like a bygone era at this point.
I'm guessing so.
Yeah, I spent a few years in the Obama administration during the second term. Between 2015, 2017-ish. And I was in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. So that office was, in that administration, actually one of the largest components of the White House. And it worked on everything from environment and energy issues to technology, policy, to, questions of national security and international affairs. There was a really wide-ranging group of experts there. So I had the real privilege of working for the latest CTO of the U.S. government, Megan Smith, and we had a sort of wily band of policy pirates that worked on a whole host of different things, but just really extraordinary colleagues and an amazing way to sort of cut my teeth on the policy world. But yeah, it was really extraordinary.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you would work on day to day in a job like that? Because I think every time I hear about the White House having a CTO, I'm like, what does that mean? What do they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. It
do they build back-end infrastructure? What do they do?
Sometimes, it's really interesting the range of work there is to do related to tech and government. The Obama administration was pretty well known for being the first in which we started a digital service component of the government. So that work, in large part all happened before I even arrived there. But there was an extraordinary group of people that worked to build out the U.S. digital service. There was a presidential innovation program that brought a lot of technologists into different parts of government as well. And then the CTO's office was sort of a center point for a lot of that work. And Megan and her predecessor, Todd Park, were really the folks who helped sponsor that work, in the West Wing and make it really happen. And it would not have happened if it wasn't a presidential priority either. So having Obama's interest as a president in the necessity of building the right infrastructure and having agencies understand the far-reaching consequences of technology and, like you said, actually build the back-end infrastructure necessary to upgrade citizen service delivery and a whole host of other different parts of government was really necessary. And that project is far from over. It's really pretty incredible to reflect on the amount of work that is going to be required of getting, dragging the government kicking and screaming into the 21st century. But it's
20
a problem.
years in.
Yeah, it's
right.
It's really amazing how in many places how outdated the technology is. And how far we are from, sitting here in San Francisco, it's a world away, truly, from where many departments and agencies are in the U.S. government. And that being said, it's not just a U.S. issue. It really is something that plagues the public sector across the world. It's a struggle for governments everywhere and something that really deserves more investment and attention, I think.
Yeah. The Digital Services Agency that came out of that administration is really... the legacy of that has been so important, right? I'm familiar with 18F, which is just an unbelievably impressive governmental agency. How apolitical are roles like that?
I would say they're pretty separated from partisan politics, at least, or they should be.
Right.
Part of why I went into science and technology policy was because it did feel much more shielded from the political winds. But that's not the case in every era or every presidency, right? So, I probably don't need to tell you, but Trump Trump is not the most science-friendly president we've ever had. So it's hard to say what level of investment, time, energy, care, and attention is really being paid to some of those questions right now. But under ideal conditions, you hope that these issues are not partisan. You hope that they're not considered quote unquote political. You hope that any government under almost any condition would be interested in building, fundamentally investing in making sure that it has the capacity to do its work effectively and with modern tools and have the understanding for what technology and the state of technology entails for policy questions as well. Right. So yeah, I guess that would be one way of answering the question.
Yeah, like these roles should be apolitical, but are not always, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's hard too when you're situated in them maybe sometimes because they are subject to the forces of, political ecosystem more broadly, just like anything would be, especially in Washington. But yeah, I think a lot of the folks working there are truly there because of a really incredible mission orientation. And there's still a lot of people doing that important work today in the U.S. government. So I think you're totally right. The legacy persists. And thankfully, we still have a lot of really amazing talent being invested in those issue areas.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think people who serve in roles like that, I have so much admiration. That's really cool.
Likewise, yeah.
So how did you go from that office at the White House to the Partnership on AI, of which you are the founding executive director? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It sounds like a very glamorous title.
It does.
When you're the first staff member hired by the board and, build everything, you have to figure out how to put yourself on payroll in the first instance. So
it's a little bit like running a startup.
It totally is. Yeah. We actually call ourselves one because I think that's totally accurate. But I guess the story is sort of wandering. I was working on AI policy issues from the U.S. government, and in the last couple of years that we were there before the transition happened in January 2017, there was a really big push on policy questions associated with artificial intelligence. And that meant both looking at what a national sort of AI strategy from a policy standpoint might start to look like for the United States. We also did a ton of work with a lot of amazing colleagues across agencies and departments in the U.S. government on the first national research and development strategic plan for the United States in AI. So that it was a document that really forced, the interagency, as we called it, into conversation with one another. The defense and intelligence agencies together with the Department of Transportation and Department of Labor and you name it. There were, probably 40 or 50 of them that we were coordinating with, and having them all kind of run an audit internally, assessing the investment levels that they were making in AI-related tools, technologies, research and development, and then producing a sort of aggregated understanding for what was happening across the U.S. government in that technology area. And that, was specifically focused especially on academic research investments. So the NSF was a leading component of that work as well here in the United States. But that work really surfaced a lot of important questions. And it was right around the time when I think the industry was, even before the moment in which we find ourselves now, really starting to look itself in the mirror a little bit more. And I had the privilege of working really closely with a lot of leading AI research scientists in the field on the policy recommendations that we were producing for the U.S. government at the time, and with international colleagues as well, folks from the UK government and other places. And a group of them actually got together around 2016 when we were in the midst of publishing those reports and doing that work. And they started this organization called the Partnership on AI. Mm-hmm. And it really was sort of a union of concerned scientists that generated it. It was the director of research, global research at Microsoft, and the head of AI research at Amazon and Apple, and IBM was involved, and Facebook, and Google. Can't forget Google.
Never forget Google, because wow, are they in the news for this right now?
Yeah. And so all these folks came together, and really because they felt like a personal imperative to have a more centralized and participatory way of asking and answering the really hard questions associated with AI and its responsible development. So I ended up sort of in the right place at the right time, honestly, I think. And as I was leaving government and really trying to think deeply about how to carry the work forward and how to do that in a public service orientation still, even though I wasn't going to be an actual public servant from the public sector context, this nonprofit organization was getting started. So I started a conversation with the board when they were recruiting an executive director, and then found myself in the lucky position of ending up here. So
Nice.
That was 2 years ago. And we, I was the first staff member, like I said, but today we're an organization of 30 here in San Francisco. And that's just the sort of tip of the iceberg, because our community is actually, we're a partnership organization. So we work with a coalition of 100 institutions across the world, not just the 6 founding companies, but civil society organizations and academic institutions and other for-profit entities, and all in an effort to draw them into the same conversations about the issues.
And what was the primary motivator of these people who originally came together and were like, we need a group of experts who can kind of ask one another the hard questions about ethical AI and actually kind of come to conclusions, like come to answers together? What was the primary motivator there? Is it that they saw this sort of inattention to these larger questions as an imminent threat, or?
Yeah, I think that could be part of it. I also think there was a heightening understanding around the importance of multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approaches to looking at and answering some of these questions, and an understanding associated with that it's not just like going to be a bunch of computer scientists in a room that figure this stuff out. It can't be, because these are societally scaled challenges, and you have to really situate technology in the context into which it is more broadly being deployed. So that it's a really big task, right? And it requires a lot of different types of people and disciplines and institutions, and a type of a level of representation that just isn't present in the technology industry right now, frankly. So, and I mean that at the basic level in terms of like the sort of racial, gender, et cetera, makeup of the tech industry as it stands. And then also in the way that technology does not necessarily reach into communities that it directly impacts to the degree that it maybe should sometimes. And getting those communities involved directly in technology governance questions is really, really important. So we kind of seek to bridge that gap in many ways. It's going to be an ongoing project for our organization, but more broadly for the field, I hope, as well. And I think another motivating force to your question is also, dare I say it, it was humility. I really think, it's not often you characterize the tech industry as humble, but individuals often can be. And recognizing the power that they had to affect change and knowing that they weren't singularly able to do it in the right way, I think is also to their credit, the founders of this organization and a lot of the people that we work with every day. It's really a community of folks who realize that they can't do it alone.
That's actually very heartening.
Yeah, it is. It's it gets me up every morning, honestly. It's really it's an amazing group of people. So if change starts with individuals, if anyone subscribes to that theory, then I think it stands to, we stand to prove, I think, that that can be the case.
Yeah. Can you give an example of sort of one of the societal challenges that you work on and sort of how you bridge the gap between that societal challenge and actually reaching the community of people who that societal challenge impacts? Like, I'm thinking especially of, I think the main risk that people tend to associate with the development of AI technology is changes in the labor market, right? Like changes to people's jobs, people essentially getting technologized out of their jobs. And I know that that's something that you all work on. And I'm curious if you have examples of how you've actually reached communities that are affected by that.
Yeah, that's a great question and a really important issue area. We are, I would say, just at the beginning of exploring some of the questions associated with AI and its impacts on labor and the economy as a community and an organization. But some of the early work that we've done on that topic has really tried to bring worker voices in more centered in the conversation, because they're often the community missing when we discuss at a much more abstract level what we mean by fractures in the labor market or marginalization, and ultimately they are going to bear the brunt of the burdens that are being discussed in academic terms or otherwise. And so it's really important to have them be the center point for the discussion. So we have one sort of union of unions involved in our work, UNI, Global Union. They represent thousands of workers globally and in a whole host of different industry verticals. And they've been a great resource to our community as we've started to think about this topic. We've also worked with some foundations and philanthropic entities and frontline community organizations and worker voice advocacy organizations to start a conversation about what is actually needed insofar as understanding the landscape and some of the changes that might be coming, and how to effectively empower the meaningful participation of the communities that we're talking about in decisions about those questions. So I know that's pretty vague, but those are some early explorations that we've started. And we actually just hired somebody to our team to focus on these issues full time. So I'm really optimistic about us being able to spend a lot more time and energy kind of investigating these questions. But in general, they touch every organization almost every organization we work with will be impacted by some of these issues. And so, and not least of which the technology companies, of course. And so understanding what we can do to position them as an effective lever for change and empower them to make decisions that will ultimately benefit people and society is really hopefully what the end game is going to entail.
Yeah. I'm curious about how you feel like as a policy person who previously worked within government and as a policy person who is now working sort of outside of government and more in step with technology companies. I'm curious about how you feel about a lot of the standard party lines that we hear from lawmakers about the sort of looming threat of AI on things like the labor market. Because I think that the mantra has always been retraining, right? I think a lot of the research shows that retraining is often not successful. That conversation is starting to sort of shift, especially with some of the current Democratic presidential candidates. And I'm curious now, as a person who's working together with technology companies, like how do you actually feel? Like what do you feel is the policy that we should all be talking about to actually solve this?
The $1 million question.
Yeah, I know.
Or $4 billion question.
I was going to say, if you actually have the answer to this, then you're probably doing fine.
Yeah, I should be somewhere else, I think. But that is a great question. I was actually at lunch today with one of our program leads, Katya Kilnova, who's focused on some of these issues within our organization. And she and I we actually were like chewing on this question specifically. I think I asked her almost point blank exactly what you just said. What are your ideas? And
what are some of the other ideas that we all have, right? Well, there have to be others.
She made a really good point, which was that the onus can't just be on the workers, right?
No, that's so true.
Reskilling, upskilling, whatever skilling, it really does.
And it puts all the burden on the people who have been displaced.
Right. And so there has to be, I mean, the way I've referred to it is as a sort of full stack approach in technology speak. That means you really have to think about all the different aspects of the worker life cycle, of the different interventions that are available to us. It can't just be institutional interventions within companies. It can't just be interventions at the level of the worker or individual. And it can't just be public policy alone, I think, because the picture is so complex. So it probably, and this is an unsatisfactory answer, but probably has to be a combination of a lot of different things. And public policy has a huge role to play on this issue, maybe more than almost any other right now. It requires proactive attention and planning from governments everywhere to be thinking about how to support economies of the future and of, current economies as well. And companies cannot just see this as a corporate social responsibility issue. It really has to be understood as central to their business models and incentives to think about the humans involved in their work. And, it is also something that we'll have to approach through education probably as well. But what that intervention looks like, I still think needs to be explored further.
Yeah, I actually find that to be a very helpful answer, right? That there is no single silver bullet and it's going to have to be a holistic approach.
Yeah, I will say a lot of the talk about giving everyone $1,000 to solve this problem, I won't name any names, but that conversation has been elevated both because of the 2020 presidential election and otherwise. And I'm glad for that elevation in the public discourse. But I also think that you're right. That is this sort of silver bullet version of a solution. And I think that diminishes the nuance and complexity of this problem. So I'm not really team UBI, but that's just me speaking personally.
Or maybe you could be team UBI if it wasn't
UBI and other things.
Yeah, exactly. If it wasn't a different ride or die system for this single solution. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I feel like the need to have a very straightforward, singular response to these things sometimes obfuscates the actual complexity of the problem and therefore the necessary complexity of the solution.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I agree.
Well, is there anything that you all are working on right now that you're really excited about and want to talk about a little bit?
Oh, man. The list is long.
Yeah.
I think, one thing we've talked about a little bit publicly, but I think more people should be even more excited about is some project work that we're conducting that we call About ML. It's a big acronym that, frankly, I can't really remember what all the letters in it stand for, but it is fundamentally about transparency in the machine learning lifecycle. And I think it's really interesting because the topic of transparency has come up a lot, both in the sort of public discourse around AI governance and then also certainly in the scientific research community where there has been a lot of discussion, especially recently, about how you actually operationalize the value of transparency in AI and ML technologies. And there are technical aspects to that conversation. There are societal aspects to that conversation and socio-technical ones. But broadly, what we're trying to do is converge our community around a set of standards, essentially, for developers to adopt as they're thinking about this stuff. And one related set of work is a body of research that has come out of a lot of organizations, ranging from academic institutions to some industrial research organizations at companies that has focused on what labeling data sets and models actually entails in such a way that the users can understand data provenance and what the intended purpose is of the data or the model. And essentially it amounts to what can be described as a nutrition label for, data and models, which is really helpful given that exists in other industries. Electronic components, for example, you can have a tiny piece of something and it comes with this whole fact sheet on what it is supposed to do and how it fits into everything. And it's kind of crazy that we don't have that if you think about it for, the work that we're doing in this industry. So we're trying to do that, and we're trying to do it in a way that really upends the traditional standards model. We're including a lot of, hopefully, more diversity than is typical in those conversations. And we're partnering with the University of Washington's Tech Policy Lab to do it. They have an amazing program called Diverse Voices that I'd really recommend everyone check out. But it essentially brings the concept of a sort of citizens' jury into deliberations, whether about academic publications, in their case often, or in our case, it would be about this standards generation process. So bringing communities to this discussion is really kind of the intention. But it's a really interesting experiment for us to be running at this time. And I think I'm really hopeful that it produces some findings that the whole community and field can learn from as well.
How can people participate or find out more about these things?
Great question. So this is actually a work process that we went to the public for comments on as well. So we just had our first comment period close, but I think that there's a big steering committee working on this set of questions, and they will likely go back out to the public for another set of comment periods somewhat soon. So in that regard, it kind of mirrors the policy process as well, but we're trying to make it as participatory as we can. So you can go to our website, and if you there's a landing page for the project and a lot of reading on it if you're curious, and you can probably sign up for updates there.
Okay. So we'll include the project page for About ML in the show notes. Awesome.
Great.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been really fun.
Yeah.
So now it's time for a listener question. This one comes in from Ari via email. Ari is like our... Thanks for sending in all these questions. They're really good. And this one, Ari says, in a recent podcast, a listener asked if there was ongoing research into algorithmic bias in AI. I thought this was an interesting example of biased AI in the incarceral system. And he goes on to quote kind of a section of this article that he links to that we will provide a magic link to somewhere in the show notes, I guess. I'm looking at Marie. But the article says, even in states working to eliminate the role of cash bail, such as New Jersey, a past failure to appear can mean the difference between confinement and freedom. In 2017, the state virtually abolished its cash bail system, but defendants are rated by a tool that uses 9 factors to evaluate a person's statistical risk for failing to appear in court or being involved in new criminal activity. In each of those categories, prior failure to appear adds significant risk to a person's score. What do you think of this?
I mean, I have many thoughts on this. Right. Wait, what are your thoughts, John?
On like the adversarial justice system?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I think of when I think of failures or failure to appears is like the problem that the sort of perpetual loop of the working poor, which is like you can't get off of work to go appear in court because you'll lose your job. And then if you lose your job, and you're in a much worse position than you were before. But if you don't appear in court, then you are also in a much worse position than you were before. And so you are probably more likely to have a failure to appear if you have the kind of job that has inflexibility or is difficult to get to, or maybe you don't have a car.
Or you have insecure hours in the first place.
Exactly. And so you're already susceptible to like, being given less desirable shifts. If like you have to go out of work at some point for a court appearance, your working life is much more precarious. And then if you end up in a situation where your cash bail is set based on something that has to do with failures to appear, then you're obviously being punished yet again for your socioeconomic status, right? So I think this is definitely a really good example of bias within the prison system in general.
Yeesh. I mean, the article goes on to just kind of build on this topic of bias and saying basically that the score becomes a proxy for race, more or less. That not the person writing the article, but an interviewee says it's extremely concerning to say that we want to end money bail because it disproportionately impacts people of color, but then put in a new system that further impacts people of color and call it reform.
What would be the new system that's getting put in?
So the new system would be using an algorithmic tool like this to determine someone's risk factors, like a credit score for their ability to appear in court or not.
Oh, God. So just replacing the current bias system with a bias system that is automated and driven by an algorithm because it's probably being fed data that is based on kind of historical rates of failures to appear, which are all probably coded racially and socioeconomically.
Well, exactly. And it's like, it kind of calls into question what's the purpose of bringing someone to court and, their ability to restore themselves. Like if we're using an algorithmic tool that's relying on past data to make future decisions, it's going to negatively impact anyone who's been through the court system for whatever reason.
Well, it's going to encode within the algorithm the biases that were present in the historical data.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to automate our like currently manual systems for like imposing bias on people. Great.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What was the original question? What do we think of this?
I mean, the way I feel about this is that it feels very dark.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just like a reflection of an adversarial court system. Like, in theory, it's supposed to be, a prosecution and a defense, and kind of in the middle, the truth emerges. But it seems like we never even get to that point anyway in the current system, because it's like there's a cash bail system, because most decisions don't even go to trial. Like, it's just charges are kind of levied and then there's a plea, and it seems like an area that's ripe for reform, but yeah, using a mathematical tool, I would see would just be building on the past, and that's just kind of making it worse.
The real question to me is how you train an algorithm like this in order to reduce the bias that it's going to bring to the system. And I don't know what the answer to that is.
I have no idea. Yeah, you probably don't do that. You don't train an algorithm to make these decisions. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe we leave it to the people, the humans.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Like what you're saying is like we don't train anything to do this, but then we're just letting humans continue to do the exact same
right
messed up things that they've been doing that have resulted in the system we have.
And we can start with ending cash bail.
Yeah, we can start with that.
Way to go, New Jersey. Thank you, Ari, for the question.
Yes, thank you.
For any future questions, send us an email. It's hello@all-turtles.com, or you can tweet us at @allturtlesgo. This podcast is a production of the All Turtles Worldwide Media Empire. We recorded this episode in the world-class Donatello Studios in San Francisco, California. Thanks to Terah Lyons for joining us this episode. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, send us an email to hello@all-turtles.com. Marie reads every message. Thanks to everyone who made this episode possible, including Jim Metzendorf for editing, Marie McCoy-Thompson for producing, Chris Plug for his audio expertise, Micah Rivera for our artwork, and Matt Ammerman for our theme music. On behalf of Jessica Collier, Phil Libin, and yours truly, John C. Fuentes, and the rest of the All Turtles team, thanks for listening.